in the hill country of Moab, taking his wife and 2 sons with him. The man's name was Elimelech, and his wife was Naomi, and their 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Epaphrathites from Bethlehem in the land of Judea. And when they reached Moab, they settled there. Then Elimelech died, and Naomi was left with her 2 sons. The 2 sons married Moabite women. One married a woman named Orpah, the other a woman named Ruth. About 10 years later, both Mahlon and Chilion died. This left Naomi alone without her sons or her husband. Then Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had blessed his people in Judah by giving them good crops again. So Naomi and her daughters-in-law got ready to leave Moab to return to her homeland. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she set out from the place where they had been living, and they took the road that would lead them back to Judah. But on the way, Naomi said to her daughters-in-law, "Go back to your mother's homes, and may the Lord reward you for your kindness to your husbands and to me. May the Lord bless you with the security of another marriage." Then she kissed them goodbye, and they all broke down and wept. "No," they said, "we want to go with you to your people." But Naomi replied, "Why should you go on with me? Can I still give birth to other sons that could grow up to be your husbands? No, my daughters, return to your parents' home, for I am too old to marry again. And even if it were possible, and I were to get married tonight and bear sons, then what? Would you wait for them to grow up and refuse to marry someone else? No, of course not, my daughters. Things are far more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord himself has raised his fist against me." And again they wept together. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung tightly to Naomi. "Look," Naomi said, "your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. You should do the same." But Ruth replied, "Don't ask me to leave you and turn back. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord punish me severely if I allow anything but death to separate us." When Naomi saw that Ruth was determined to go with her, she said nothing more. Here ends the reading. My friends, what do you need to live? And let's consider this question together this morning. What do you need to live? I mean, you're probably thinking things like, well, you need shelter so you don't die of exposure. You need food for nourishment. You need water for hydration and for bathing. And if you have these things, you can survive. But I'm not sure these things are really enough for you to live. You see, living is more than not being dead. The opposite of dead is surviving. Because there are people that we know who have passed away from this life who are obviously no longer surviving, but we know they are living. That's why we're Christians. Because we know there is more to living than blood pressure and a pulse. So, what is it, though, that makes us truly alive? And this is going to be Pastor Tim's cliche part of the sermon today. What is it? It's love. Love is what makes us alive. And I know you've heard this expressed in enough ways that you already knew that's what I was going to say. But what does it mean to love? And there lies the problem. If we have to love in order to live, then what does love mean? You know, we're bombarded with messages all the time of, what you're supposed to love. Hollywood will tell you it's sex, and that is blatantly wrong. The TV will tell you that it's going to be buying whatever the latest gizmo or product is. That's also wrong. You're constantly getting messages that you love food, that you love drink, that you love traveling. You are bombarded with messages that you love everything, to the point that when I began to work on this sermon for this morning, I had to sit and think about it a second. What is love, really? Now, as you all know, and Leah mentioned it a few moments ago, the Better Together event is going on, and all the small groups have launched, and they're getting together. And I knew that we were going to need a lot of lead time to prepare for them and writing lessons and getting things coordinated. So I actually wrote this sermon over a month ago. And I wrote this sermon sitting back in the sound booth, and I was here on a Thursday night with the Awaken Band, and they were up here practicing, and I was back there writing. So I wrote this part of the sermon not realizing that on this particular day, only 2 of the members of the band were going to be here. But apparently a soccer tournament and a broken guitar string and a family issue has thinned out our crowd this morning. But as I watched them practicing, and you've seen them all enough that you know what I'm talking about, Those guys love each other in the band. They bounce off each other so well. There are no egos in the band, and that's why they work. Love is what makes our Awakened band function. They love the music, they love each other, and they love God. That's why they're here. That's why they work. So my friends, in our day and age, love is such a weird word, though, that we use it for too much stuff. That's why it gets confusing. We throw the word love around about so many things that we don't know what it means anymore. And we look at things like my experience on that Thursday night watching the band together and think that that's odd because we don't see it that often, yet we're using the word love all the time. So if I asked you to come up with a definition of the word love, could you do it in just a couple of words? Because that's not as easy as you might think. So before we come up with a definition of the word love, let's look at an example of love. And for this example, I want to turn to this passage from Ruth chapter 1. Now, I know that almost every time that we consider the story of Ruth, we also have a sermon on Ruth. Ruth is dedicated to her mother-in-law, and because of her dedication, she follows her mother-in-law even after the death of her husband. Ruth is usually the one we look at as the example in this story. But today, I want to go in a little different direction. This morning, I want to appreciate the example of love that Naomi shows us in this passage. Now, in this story, in these verses I read, things go bad for all three of these women. When Naomi's husband, Elimelech, dies, Naomi is still in good shape. Of course, she's sad that he's dead and all that, but she's still in good shape because she has two sons who are there to take care of her. She would have been considered a very blessed woman because there were still two men responsible for her. Their names were Mahlon and Chilion. So Naomi's sons, Mahlon and Chilion, went on to get married. They married two women named Orpah and Ruth. 10 years pass after Elimelech's death. Things, I guess, are going apparently well. And then something happened. Again, we don't know what it was, but now Mahlon and Chilion are also dead, leaving Naomi without sons and Orpah and Ruth without husbands. Now, this was a desperate situation because in this male-dominated culture, these women could not own land. They could not work outside of the home. They would really have a difficult time supporting themselves. They would have been dependent on charity and outside help to get them through. That was the only choice they had because in their particular situation, there were no men to take care of them. Now, at this time that they find themselves alone, the famine begins to subside. And the crops begin to return to Judah. So Naomi says, as we just sang the song about, I want to go home. Go back to my homeland. And according to chapter 1, Naomi had no family really to return to. She was simply going back to her country. And it's very logical. It's a very good choice, actually. It's logical to think that she would be treated better by her own people than she would be by foreigners where she lived. So that's why Naomi says, I'm going to go home. But in going home, Naomi had a specific problem. And that problem was her two daughters-in-law. Now, in the world of this time, these two daughters-in-law would have become the property of the leading man of the family. However, in this particular case, there was no man occupying that position. So if Naomi's husband would have still been living, these two widowed daughters-in-law would have become his responsibility. But the fact that there is nobody in that spot leaves Naomi in a bad position. She's now responsible for these two daughters, and there's no man to take responsibility for any of them. Now, one of the greatest responsibilities of a man in this culture was he was to become the father of children. So these two daughters-in-law represent both the legacy of Naomi's sons as well as the legacy of her own husband. You know, these two daughters-in-law were to go on and have children that were to be the lineage of Naomi's husband, Elimelech. That was their job, to go bear children for the family. That was the arrangement. Now, allow me an aside here for just a second. This sounds very different to us today. We here today, we're all real woke about everything. You know, girl power, women's lib, so on and so forth. And all these things that we have today are making us say, I don't know about this passage. I'm not sure I really want to listen to this because that's not how we are today. And that's true. That's not how we are. But what we have to understand when we read a story like Ruth is we today have the benefit of wealth. We today have time. We have resources. We have plenty to eat. We don't have to work from sun up to sundown to make sure there's something on the table to eat. So all of that time and all of that luxury and all of that opportunity gives us the chance to have conversations about things like equality and rights. Very important things. Friends, when you're working hard as long as the sun was up to provide for your family, nobody has time, energy, or opportunity to waste time trying to figure things out like this, because eating is more important than ensuring the genders are equal. So that's why this sounds very foreign to us, is because it is very foreign to us. But we have to read Ruth in the context of where they lived. So, in a time and place where gender roles had to be very clearly defined in a way that supported the growth and development of children in a particular family, since that's the context, we need to take a few moments here this morning and appreciate what Naomi does here. When she is preparing to go back to her homeland, she's looking at these two women from Moab. Moab, was a neighboring place, one of the tribes of Israel, but it would have represented a very different people. Ruth and Orpah would have been outsiders in Naomi's home. So this is beyond the problem that they needed to have children in the name of their dead husband. She also had to go find them husbands, and they would have come from a distant relative's family. That was not going to be easy. Now, had one of Naomi's sons survived, it would have been easy. But to find somebody not from the immediate family to come and take care of things, that was going to be very complicated for Naomi and Orpah and Ruth when they got back home. So Naomi goes to these two girls and says, go home. Go back to your own people. Go back to your original families where their fathers, whom I'm assuming were still living, could marry them off again. Naomi knew for a fact that the best chance that these two women had was to go back and rejoin their original families. What Naomi gave these two women the chance to do was abandon her husband's family by releasing them from their obligation. Friends, I can go back and show you in the law where this would have led to a death sentence for Orpah and for Ruth. And if it was found out that Naomi was in on this, probably for Naomi too. Because none of these women would have been fulfilling their contractual obligations of the continuing of their husband's lineage. That wouldn't have went over well. So we got to ask ourselves, why did Naomi do this? She did this because this invitation to go home was in the best interest of Orpah and of Ruth. Naomi wanted to give these two women the chance to have families of their own, to have husbands of their own. Please understand what a great sacrifice that would have been given how this culture operated. It's huge. And I can tell you that men in the ancient world who lived around this time would have heard this story and been like, I do not think so. That is not how this works. Naomi offered these two girls something that should never have been offered at all. All three of these women had an obligation to their dead husbands, and Naomi had no right to sacrifice the lineage either of her two sons or of her own husband to do something like this. It would have been countercultural. And when Orpah decides to go and she kisses Naomi goodbye, the vast majority of the original hearers of this story would have said she's going to get stoned to death for this because she's not being faithful to providing children for her husband. She was going to bear another man's children, and that would have been blasphemous. So Orpah leaves, but Ruth stays. Okay, that's a little better than what Orpah did, according to the culture. But why does Ruth stay? If you read on through this portion of chapter 1, if you read it very closely, Ruth stays because of her devotion to Naomi. Now, interestingly enough, when I was originally writing this sermon, at this point in the sermon, I went back to the scripture to check which girl was married to which son. I wanted to know which one of the two sons Ruth was married to. And you know what? The book of Ruth doesn't tell us. I don't know which son was married to which daughter-in-law. It does not ever connect them. It says there are two sons, two daughters-in-law, but we don't know who belonged to who. The two sons' names were Mahlon and Chilion, but the book of Ruth doesn't make it clear which son married which wife. And the two sons, after they die, are not mentioned again. What seems like it should have been a very important thing as to which wife belonged to which son, but the book of Ruth does not make that clear. That means that when Ruth clings to Naomi and says, I ain't leaving, she's not staying because of her culturally mandated devotion to her husband. She never even says the guy's name. Ruth clings to Naomi out of devotion to Naomi. Now, most of the people in the ancient world would have heard this story and been like, well, I'm glad she stayed, but wow, that motivation could have been a little better. That's not really how that's supposed to work, but that's how it happened. What Naomi does here in offering these two girls a chance to leave goes so much in the face of what should have been done. She should never have given Orpah and Ruth the option to leave in the first place, but she did. Why did she do this? It's because Naomi loved these two girls. Why do I say that? I say that because she demonstrates true love toward these two girls by putting their interests above her own interests. Naomi looked at their current situation and she sacrificed her own interests. She gave up what she both wanted and what she needed in this situation to allow these two women the chance to go and have what they wanted. Naomi showing back up in her homeland. If she would have went and had her two daughters-in-law with her, that would have been a far better situation than for Naomi to show up alone. It's very likely that Naomi would have died without someone to help her and possibly take her in. Naomi knew the risk, but she loved these two girls enough to put what was best for them above her own interests. That is love. That's how it's supposed to work. Now, in this day and age where we love food and we love sports team and we throw the word love around about everything, we forget what that word actually means. You see, whatever it is that you truly love, you will prioritize and value the object of your love above your own value. Now, what you love could be a person, could be an object, could be something you like to do, could be a hobby. If you love it, you will sacrifice to what you love. And in this world of instant gratification, and the fact that there are so many people in our world who worship themselves, for me to stand up here this morning and say that, well, love is really almost totally sacrifice, that sounds completely different than what you are told from basically everywhere else. The world's message about love is that love is about our own gratification. It's about our own fulfillment. I'm sorry, friends, that's not it. That's not true. Love is about finding things in your life that you are willingly going to put more value upon than you put upon yourself. Hollywood has taught us that we find love so that we can get what we want. That is a lie. Love always involves sacrifice. Love always includes pain. However, the purpose of love is that love is what gives our lives purpose. You see, without love, we would live the most shallow and boring of lives. Your life truly has no purpose till you find something worth loving. Now, there are some of you out here this morning who are listening to this sermon and you're thinking, you're looking at your life and you don't have that special somebody there that you love enough to sacrifice for and enough to do all these other things for. And that may make you question, what did I mess up? You may question where your life is going. Well, friends, allow me to be very, very clear on this point. I am expanding the definition of love far beyond the way we're used to hearing it. I'm taking it a whole lot farther out than just romantic love. So please hear this sermon in the context of how important it is to love. It's a lot more than getting married. You see, in your life, the object of your love may be a person, but it could also be a cause that's near and dear to you. Could be a conviction that you hold, maybe a faith that you have. And you love whatever that is so much that your life revolves around it. Honestly, it's a good description of where I am in my life. God has given me a great love in my life, and it's the church. I have sacrificed a tremendous amount on behalf of the church to do all I can to help build and grow the Jesus movement across the face of the earth. It is a cause I truly love, and it gives my life great meaning. And at the same time, I'll tell you, it has taken a lot away from me as well. But it's that love that gives me purpose. And it's the same thing in your life. The people, the causes, the experiences in your life that you love to the point that you change your life because of them. Those are the things that you love, and they also give your life meaning. See, once Ruth decides she is not parting from Naomi, look how clear she is about purpose in her life. Look what she says. I'll quote to you. Ruth says, "Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I'll die, and there I will be buried." Friends, that's what purpose looks like. I now know what the rest of my life is going to be like because of this love that I feel. Ruth says, "I will make my life about being devoted to your care." That's love. And when you're willing to make your life different because of who or what you love, that's when your life takes on purpose. Love makes you step outside of your comfort zone. Love will make you get involved. Love will push your boundaries. Love will give you the chance to live. Love will also make you make a stand when you don't want to. It's going to make you draw a line that you're not going to cross. It will make you go places, do things, say stuff, and hold up rules that you don't want to do, but you're going to do it because of what I love. It's motivation, friends. It's how life works. Ruth and Naomi's lives were both radically changed by this love. And clearly, God blesses this kind of love. Because if you know the story of Ruth, you know what happens. Naomi goes on to arrange for Ruth to marry a man named Boaz. Ruth and Boaz have a son. His name is Obed. Obed goes on to have a son named Jesse. And Jesse goes on to have a whole group of sons, the youngest of which happened to be a little shepherd boy named David. God blessed these two women because of the love that they shared. And the blessing that they received went on for generations. Led us even to King David. My friends, love is so important to a well-adjusted life that you would think that it would be hard to do. It would be hard to find something to love. Let me be honest with you, it's not. Because no matter what you do in your life, no matter where you go, what you say, what's important to you, you're going to love something. You're going to love someone. It's going to happen. The purpose of the sermon is to help you to be intentional about that which you love. Because if you don't consciously choose what you love, then you're going to default to the one thing that everybody who claims they love nothing actually loves. That is yourself. If you love nothing else in life, you're going to love you. Now keep in mind, you're going to do all the things I described in this sermon. You're going to sacrifice. You're going to do things for the benefit of the object of your love. That means you're going to use people and you're going to destroy yourself in order to love yourself. You're going to become self-absorbed to the point that nothing matters to you because you cannot set parameters and boundaries and have direction in your life when all your love is turned inward. Because you would think that the kind of people who love themselves that much would be truly happy, but you know as well as I do, they are the most miserable people on the face of the earth. What happens when someone is unwilling or unable to love anything other than themselves? What happens to them? They eventually damage or destroy everything in their lives that could have been healthy or wholesome. They almost always end up hurting themselves through dangerous addictions that they use to cope with themselves. Happens almost every time. Friends, love is important because it sets a direction. Here's the last thing I'm going to say about love this morning. The ability to love, the ability that we have to love is a gift from God. But just like so many other gifts from God, it's a gift that can be very dangerous if you don't manage it in a healthy way. Whatever it is in your life that you sacrifice to, whatever you're willing to live your life differently because of, that's what you love. Now my prayer is that your life is filled up with things that you love. Because that's when you're going to be the happiest, and that's when you're going to be the most fulfilled. It's also when you're going to be sacrificing the most. And it's also going to be when your purpose is the most clear in your mind. If you have your life filled with stuff that you love. So my friends, may God bless you through whatever or whoever it is that you love. May that be something that blesses you as you seek to be a blessing to whatever that object of love is. And may you experience that blessing in Jesus' name. Amen. Now,